Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu filling in for Riz Khan. On today's show, the political scandal that is rocking the United States. The governor of the state of Illinois has been arrested on charges he tried to sell President-elect Barack Obama's vacant Senate seat to the highest bidder. In a pay-to-play scam, Rod Blagojevich allegedly sought to raise $2.5 billion from those seeking the Senate seat, a post that he alone has the power to fill under the state's constitution. Now, speculation is swelling over who knew about the governor's scheme and who was actually willing to pay for the Senate seat. For his part, the governor is out on bail, back at work, and says it's business as usual. We ask the question, are political trade-offs out of the ordinary, or is it just how things get done? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room, and then take part. We also welcome your phone calls on the show. Now, joining us to provide insight into the world of Illinois' political machinery is Chicago insider and former mafia lawyer, Robert Cooley. After years of defending the mafia in court, Robert switched sides to help the government take down Chicago's first ward. He details it all in his autobiography, When Corruption Was King. To put this in some historical context, we're joined by Kim Long in Denver. He's author of The Almanac of Political Corruption, Scandals and Dirty Politics, which chronicles centuries of political bribery, mudslinging, influence peddling and adultery. And here with me to examine the potential political fallout and how far the scandal may reach is Christopher Hayes, the Washington, D.C. editor for The Nation. He's also a fellow at the New America Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you to the program.
Good to be here.
Chris, let me start with you. This show, of course, is going out to an international audience, and for the benefit of those who may not be fully aware of what this case is about, just give us the background to this case involving the Illinois governor.
Sure. It's not uncommon in American politics that a sitting senator will run for another position or a sitting congressman and be elected to that position. And there's no uniformity about how we deal with that. Every state has different rules, but very commonly the governor of the state gets to appoint a replacement to serve out the duration of the term. That's the case with Barack Obama in Illinois, whose term would be up in 2 years. So when he became elected president, the governor then had the power to appoint his replacement. Apparently what happened, according to the federal complaint, was the governor decided that this was a very valuable power that he had, and he was going to trade it for a variety of monetary incentives. Direct payments, perhaps in the form of bribes, position, some sort of cushy job where he could draw a large salary, or even a board position for his wife. I mean, they were kind of brainstorming all sorts of wacky schemes. But the fundamental idea was he was going to hand the position over to whichever candidate could provide the most pecuniary reward for him.
And all this is on tape, actually. What the police did was they tapped his telephone, and they have him allegedly saying on tape that he wanted something in exchange for this seat.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the background for this is that there, as our other guests will tell us, I'm sure, that there's a long tradition of corruption in Illinois. The governor who preceded Rod Blagojevich is currently serving jail time for a corruption scandal. Rod Blagojevich has been under federal investigation for probably several years now, and in fact, hilariously, on one of the wiretaps says to someone, warns someone, be careful what you say, you have to assume that someone's listening. So he knew that he was being wiretapped.
Well, let's go to what you've just mentioned, the long tradition that Chicago has for corruption and skullduggery generally. Robert Cooley, you've written a lot about this. We mentioned your book at the beginning of the program there. Chicago has that reputation, not just in politics, but in union matters and also in organized crime, and that's what you've been writing about. How did Illinois get that reputation?
Well, because it was a fact of life in Illinois. When I initially was with the people in Illinois, my law partner was a state senator, John DiArco. His father was John DiArco Sr., who was the first ward committeeman. And in Chicago at that time, by the time I joined up with these people, they had taken over pretty much the entire, not just the city, but the state. They had control of the elections. We controlled the elections. We rigged the vast majority of the elections. Anybody running for any office basically had to come to the first ward and get their blessing. We also controlled the judicial system, the sheriff, the attorney general, the governor's office. We controlled basically everything. That was the procedure. That was what it was like when I got involved with these people. And as I was there for about 5 or 6 years with these people, they became more and more powerful as time went on.
And this took place over a long period of time. Why is it that it was never fixed in Illinois? I mean, if it had that reputation, wasn't there someone who could fix that?
Well, certainly that could have been the case, except that the people that were supposed to be there to help were looking to put themselves onto the payroll afterwards. And in my case, the U.S. attorney that was in charge at the time, when he left office, he went to work. He represented one of the main targets of my investigation. My main target was never indicted. He received millions of dollars of money from the city for his law firm and for himself, and it was business as usual. That's the basic problem in Chicago, as probably no other city in the country, major city in the country, where you have people have access to all the money, are able to pass that money out and basically protect certain people. In return, they get protected themselves.
Well, Kim Long, from what Robert Cooley and Christopher Hayes have been telling us there, you know, Rod Blagojevich is following in a long tradition of what has been going on in Chicago. You've written a history of this. What does that tell you?
Well, that's why I wrote it. I was curious as to how widespread it was, how far back it went, and perhaps the most interesting thing to me was that it predated the country. The British overseers of the colonies had a regular system. I think it was even written down. They auctioned off colonial governorships. You come from money, you had to be an aristocrat, you had to know the right people, and you had to fork over money in order to get one of these positions. And people were, by and large, very willing to do it. In many cases, there was more than one candidate for a particular colony, and the money represented an investment. Once you were in power, most of the income you got was legal, or at least quasi-legal. You had a piece of everything that went on, from taxes and tariffs, various business ventures, licenses for people that wanted to start businesses. And after the revolution, I think the basic structure of corruption just passed on into the republic.
And you want to say something?
Well, just one of the things I think that's so fascinating, I'd be curious what Kim says about this, is corruption tends to be very unevenly distributed across the country. I mean, there are places that are famously and perpetually corrupt, and Chicago's one of them, in which, you know, every few years it seems there's a federal investigation and houses are tried to clean, and the same thing happens again. We've seen that in Louisiana, New Jersey, Rhode Island. Other states, for instance, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, tend to be incredibly clean politically. And so there's this very strange kind of cultural element to it, in which a state's political culture evolves in such a way that corruption gets passed down almost like a sort of communal tradition, you know, from generation to generation.
But Kim, go ahead.
It's one of the great unanswered questions, because there is this patchwork of activity throughout history, where there was certainly, in just about any earlier era, it was a much more corrupt country, from small towns through state governments and even the national government. But it was never continuous, and you know, places, in fact, like Wisconsin and Minnesota, which appear and have a great reputation now of being squeaky clean, had amazing backgrounds, short periods of time in some cases, where very corrupt things were underway. Denver here, we had our share back in the early part of the 1900s. Ku Klux Klan was involved, but in most cases, it seems to have gone away. And there are these places, particularly New Jersey, Louisiana, and Illinois, that appear to be hotspots. But even there, I don't think it's uniform.
Does any one political party have a fix on this, or are they both just as guilty? Kim?
Well, I attempted to count, but it's an unfair count, because it's biased toward the Democrats, since their party has a longer history. There are more Democrats that are measurably more corrupt, in the sense that they have been identified, subpoenaed, indicted, sent to jail. But there are periods, for instance, during Reconstruction, when the Republican Party first took hold as a corrupt party in the South, because it was a solidly democratic part of the country. The Republican Party was founded to fight slavery. It had a single plank on its platform before Abraham Lincoln came along, and he was the first Republican president. But during Reconstruction, the whole carpetbagger ethic, where politicians from the North, war heroes from the North, just people with money from the North, went south and ran for office, and at the governor's level it was primarily Republican, but they were dealing with Democratic legislators, and they got into a phenomenal amount of trouble, some of it not deserved, some of it false. They were accused of things that didn't happen just because of the traditional warfare between the two parties.
Well, let me bring Robert Cooley in here, and I want to bring it up to the present-day situation, the situation involving the governor of Illinois. Looking at this as a lawyer, does the government have a case here? I mean, we know that this has been, of course, a source of intense debate here in the United States, especially in the media. We know that nothing was sold, no money changed hands. Has a crime been committed here?
Well, certainly a crime has been committed. I mean, they could have carried this on a little further, and I'm really surprised that they didn't, because had they allowed them some more time, some of these people most certainly would have made the bids and would have put some money in front. But if I can, one of the other guests was talking about things that happened in the past. I can certainly tell you why and why it proceeds in Illinois as it does. When I went to the government, my sole purpose was to try to clean up the court system. That was why I came in there, because the average citizen in Chicago didn't have a prayer. I knew that because I was involved in some of the criminal cases that were fixed, but I also was involved, and I saw a number of other cases that went on where the average person walked into court thinking he would get a fair shake, and he didn't, because the judge was on the take. But what I found out, and one of the reasons why it did continue as it did, is because the people in power, the first thing they have to do is they have to get control of the media. A perfect example was my case. The main person that I attempted to give information on, the person that was in charge of a lot of things, and the person that was able to pick all the judges, was one of my main targets. Well, he also happens to be the same person who's able to give out all the money in the city. He's the chairman of the finance committee in Chicago. He was able to hire the U.S. attorney who was supposed to prosecute him, pay him huge sums of money, and he never got prosecuted. There was no explanation as to why he didn't. He just was not prosecuted. To this day, he continues there in that same position, where he's able to pick all the judges. He's the chairman of the Democratic Judicial Slating Committee. He picks all the judges in Chicago. After I reported what I did, and it was out there, that he was fixing murder cases and molesting cases, himself and his wife afterwards was appointed to the Illinois Supreme Court, where she sits today. When she ran for re-election, nobody dared oppose her. I mean, that's the basic problem with Chicago, and why Chicago will not change, because the people in charge and the most powerful people have the media in their pockets. What I did when I came forward was I attempted to give the information to different people in the media, both the TV people and also the newspaper people. They indicated they could not do my story without verification from the judge involved. I convinced the judge involved to go on record. He was terrified and didn't want to, because he was afraid of the mob connections of this particular person. He eventually did. After he did, the reporters reported back to me, "We're not allowed to do the story." End of conversation. We are not allowed to do the story on him. That's why you have the problem you have in Chicago, and that's why it will not change. Now, getting back to the present situation with the present governor, when I was working with the government wearing a wire, I observed Rod, the present governor, who was running a gambling operation out in the western suburbs. He was paying street tax to the mob out there. I gave this information to the media too when he was running for election initially, and they would not put the information out there. They protected him. They kept all this information secret. I predicted 5 years ago when he ran the first time, I predicted he was a hands-on person who would personally be selling every position there was in the state of Illinois. That's exactly what happened. What's happened now is an absolute prediction that I made 5 years ago. But the biggest problem you have, and the reason a city can never be cleaned up, is when the people in power have the money and have the ability to silence the media, so the media will not report it. As long as that goes on, it will never change.
Okay. Christopher, I know you want to say something, but we're going to have to take a break right now, and we'll get back to this right after the break, and I'll take your answer next. So we've got to take a short break, and as we pause, let me remind you that you can join the conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room there. You can see the debate taking place there right now. We'll be right back.